So, Clan fans, so episode 3 of Outlander premiered just literally like an hour ago. And I honestly thought this was one of, personally I liked this episode a lot. It took a turn that I didn't expect it to take because I actually hadn't read a lot of spoilers about the Beardsleys because I did want to be surprised with this arc. But the Beardsleys are one complicated story, so let's discuss the episode. So, season 5 is off to a good start. Episode 1 was amazing. Episode 2 was a little on the slower side. There was a little more setup in that episode. Not as exciting, but this episode was a lot more than I expected. So what happens is that Jamie and Claire have to gather a militia, so they set out with Roger, Fergus, and the men of Fraser's Ridge, and they're off to go find more men for the fight, or at least the governor wants there to be an army to instill fear in the regulators. Not that this is officially going to start the war, because we are still quite a few years away from it. But while they're on their journey, they run into Josiah and also his brother Keziah, I think was his name. And Keziah is very disheveled. We had met Josiah in the first episode of season 5, and he's a hunter. He has a little more, his appearance isn't as disheveled, let's put it that way. And we learn that his brother was actually still being held by their master, who had bought the boys when they were very young. Their family had traveled on the ship and their family had died, so they were sold into servitude. And unfortunately, the Beardsley, Mr. Beardsley, he was very violent with the boys and he would beat on Keziah, and that's what caused him to be very deaf. Sorry, I was going to say that wrong. So yeah, they have tried to escape. Jamie wants to make sure that the boys are officially free, so he decides to go to Mr. Beardsley and at least pay for the rest of the years of their servitude. So Claire goes with him while Roger, Fergus, and the men continue to go search for more men for the militia. And so, when I first saw the trailer for this episode, it didn't look like it was going to be a good turn of events. And it wasn't, but a lot more happened than I was expecting. So, Jamie and Claire arrive to the Beardsley property, and it looks very abandoned, almost like a ghost town. And they're trying to search for at least Mr. Beardsley or somebody that's alive there. And at first they're not finding anybody, but then Jamie knocks on the door. Well, actually, first, no. This is what happens. This is a horror movie moment. He's looking through the window. He sees a goat. He looks away. He looks back. Mrs. Beardsley, right in your face. That was very much out of a horror movie. If you guys have ever watched the movie The Witch, there were some vibes there. So Jamie tries to talk to her. He says that they found the boys, they want to buy them, to make sure that they're free, and she allows them to keep them. But she's very, quick about it. She doesn't want to talk. She's very standoffish. She basically shuts the door in Jamie's face. However, Jamie still needs the paperwork just so they can prove that the boys are free, so that they can't use the paperwork against them in the future. So he tries to get Mrs. Beardsley to find the papers. They go into the house, and this is where the horror movie continues. So Claire is noticing all these marks on the wall. There's goats everywhere. Seriously, it's like The Witch. And so she's searching, like, she really doesn't want to have anything to do with this. And they kind of have to keep asking her to search for things. I can be honest, guys, I've had this experience with people. So while she's searching, Claire is very disturbed by the scent that's going on. And she eventually comes to the realization that it's not just the goats that smell. And at one point she looks up at the ceiling and there is a big icky stain above, something dripping. Ugh. And she decides to go investigate because Claire is Claire. So while she's up there, she makes a horrifying discovery that there is a seemingly dead body. And she goes to see if the man is actually dead. And when she touches his neck to see if he's got a beat, the guy is still alive. And ugh. So what happened is that he suffered a stroke, and basically he's been rotting up there for like a month, but he's not, like, he's had enough nourishment to be kept alive. So it turns out Mrs. Beardsley was keeping him alive because she wanted to slowly torture him. She wanted to give him a slow death. Because we do learn eventually that he was actually very violent towards her. He actually was violent towards all of his wives. I think she was the 5th wife. And it was mostly because a lot of them couldn't bear him children. So that was part of the reason, but he's also just a terrible man. And we don't ever see an example of him being a terrible man. It's only through what Mrs. Beardsley tells everybody. So she still wants him dead. And at one point, Claire and Jamie are distracted. She tries to strangle the man, and Jamie tries to stop her. But then at one point, she falls back against the wall and splash. No, not blood. Not what you would think, which honestly that's what I was expecting, but no, it's amniotic fluids. So it turns out she was pregnant. Like I said, I hadn't even read about this part. I just only knew slight details. So yes, she's pregnant and she's gone into labor. Thankfully, Claire has the experience to help deliver a baby, and she ends up having a girl. And at one point, Jamie is holding the baby, takes her to the window, and he notices that her skin is black. And it turns out that the baby is not Mr. Beardsley's, but Fanny was with another man in order to get pregnant. But she also takes pride knowing that it's not Mr. Beardsley's child. So, this whole story, I can't even describe like how chaotic and crazy this story was, but honestly though, like, out of all of that, it was so nice to see a baby because the baby was so cute. And it was like something that was normal in this episode. So it was a nice balance there. So Fanny finally, oh yes, her name is Fanny. She does tell Claire that. She finally calms down while she's holding the baby, and she tells Claire about everything, what Mr. Beardsley had done, how he had the wives. She sees their ghosts, they haunt her, You'd expect that out of this episode. But yeah, it's actually a very tragic story. While I was watching this last part, I actually did have tears in my eyes because this was a lot more tragic than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was just going to be about a woman murdering her husband or attempting to murder her husband, but there was so much more to the story, and it really does prove, like, you can't really judge what you're shown all the time. Like, these trailers do a good job not giving too much away, so that honestly, that was really well done how they handled this episode, the storyline. And there's more to it though. I'm not done with that. Can't talk. So, yeah, she's been through a lot, you can tell. So it does explain why she is how she is. She's just been through a lot of trauma. She finally had the chance to get back at this man who's been torturing her for over 2 years. And she finally has a chance to be free. Unfortunately, she does take that opportunity and she does leave the baby. She actually found the papers and the deed to the house. So she left that with the baby. So Claire and Jamie now have a baby to take care of. And they still have a dying Mr. Beardsley. Either Claire can save him, which would mean amputating his foot, because it's gone gangrenous. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. And obviously he suffered a stroke, so he's not going to heal very well. So there's that option to keep him alive, or Jamie can put an end to his life. But knowing what they know, they don't know if they really want to give him the mercy either way. But Jamie does eventually kill the man. So this actually does end up being a tough decision for Jamie because his father also suffered from a stroke. And he does tell Claire, like, if he ever suffers anything like that, he wants her to put an end to his life. Because he doesn't want to suffer with that. So, obviously it would be a very tough thing for Claire to do, but she does promise him that if it ever does come to that, she would. Which, they ended the episode on that note, and I hope they don't. Here's the thing. We still have a 9th book that's coming out soon. We don't know the details. We don't know what's going to happen. Supposedly it's going to be the last book. And maybe we'll get to see how Jamie and Claire spend the last moments of their lives together. Especially if it's the last book, obviously, but I don't know for the fact that it is. But I hope Jamie doesn't die that way, because that would be so sad. And that would make this a really, really sad foreshadowing moment. And it was just the way that they ended the episode that it feels like foreshadowing, which the showrunners don't know that, but unless Diana's told them something, I don't know. I'm gonna try to think positive though. So yeah, it was an interesting arc. I will say that throughout the episode, it did actually keep me on my toes, which I love episodes that do that keep me guessing like what's gonna happen next. So in a way, this was it was intense, it was also full of mystery, but it was also Jamie and Claire doing something together. They haven't really had much alone time for a while, so to see them have another adventure was also kind of special, even if it was one of the weirdest adventures, because let's be honest, it was. But honestly, like, this episode was great. And there were a couple of things I didn't mention. So earlier in the episode, Jamie got a letter because Fergus had gotten it from town, and he gave it to Jamie. Jamie opened it. What turns out is that Stephen Bonnet has been sighted, which we saw in the last episode. And he does tell Claire finally about it because he wanted to be sure that he was still alive. So yeah, Claire doesn't know that Bree knows about it, so she assumes that Bree doesn't know because Jamie thinks she doesn't know. Ugh, it's gonna be complicated at some point. So they're gonna have that issue eventually. Also, later in the episode, Claire is contemplating, like, what kind of world is this to bring a baby into? And Jamie is trying to say, like, this is the only world. And Claire's like, no, it's not. And she tells him that she does want Bree, Roger, and Jemmy to go back to the future, at least once they figure out if Jemmy can travel. And Jamie really doesn't want that. He wants them to stay. He wants them to be a family, which is understandable. This is something that he didn't have for over 20 years. And finally he has it, and now they all want to go away. And he doesn't want that. But Claire is trying to point out, like, even if she figures out how to make penicillin, it's only going to protect them from infection, but not from other things, aka Stephen Bonnet. So they're a little at odds on that, but they're not. It wasn't a fight, it was just a discussion. And unfortunately she mentions that Roger feels the same way, so that's not gonna... That might be a slight conflict between Jamie and Roger at some point. I don't know, but we'll find out. But yeah, so that's eventually going to be a conflict, but it was just a simple mention in this episode. And I don't know why they left Bree alone in charge then. At least Jamie did. Because she's not safe if Bonnet is wandering around. I mean, I'm sure they left some men at the ridge. I hope. I don't know. We'll find out. That's all I can say. But yes, great episode. I'm really looking forward to the next one. It looks like they run into some trouble as they try to recruit more men. And Roger's already making promises that he's going to bring the men back, which you got to be careful when you promise that. Sometimes it doesn't end well. But I'm sure Roger is going to learn. I know at some point there is going to be a really bad episode for Roger because there's a bad moment in the books where he does get hanged. He doesn't die, obviously, but it's very traumatic for him because, well, yeah, why wouldn't it be? But I don't know the details behind it. I don't know why it happens, how he's saved exactly, so I don't know when it's going to happen. I hope it's not in the next episode because I'm not ready for that. But either way, I'm not going to be ready for it this season if it does happen. It's just going to prove the point further that he does need to take Bree and Jemmy back to the future. Complicated, isn't it? But I also love that I don't know if Malva is gonna be introduced this season. She is technically supposed to be Claire's assistant, but instead they have made Marsley the assistant, which I don't know if that ever happened in the books at all. I can imagine they're still gonna bring Malva in, and she still could be Claire's assistant. Maybe Marsley decides not to do it anymore, or maybe they both become her assistant. I don't know. It's just an assumption. But it'd be interesting if they bring Malva's character in because she does actually bring a lot of drama into the 6th book. And I think it would actually make for a good story arc in episode. Season 6. So it'd be interesting to see her character. I hope they haven't scrapped her arc entirely. But I do also love Marsley as Claire's apprentice because she does actually take interest in this. And it would be really cool if she and Claire actually do figure out how to make penicillin in a time when this actually doesn't exist at all. And doesn't for another hundreds of years. Not hundreds, but it's supposed to be like another century and a half. But yeah, I am excited to see more of season 5. This episode has kind of brought a little more hope to my expectations. Not that I had bad expectations after the last episode, but I don't know what to expect with this season because it's so different from how the other seasons have been. So it's like I'm not really as certain about what's going to happen. And I kind of like not knowing because I spoil things for myself, only just so I know things. But at the same time, it's kind of cool just to be able to predict and see if my predictions are true or not. So, yeah, I'm loving this season so far. And I hope you guys are too. Let me know what you guys thought of the episode. What did you think of Mr. Beardsley? And what did you guys think of just like what's going on with the militia? Do you think that's going to go over well in the next episode? Because it doesn't look like it does. And it looks like baby Beardsley, that's just what I'm going to call her, she does possibly find a home in the next episode, which would be wonderful. And I am afraid to see what's going to happen with Bonnet. I don't like that Bonnet. Yeah. We will see what happens with him. Supposedly, at the end of book 5, he gets a little what he deserves. I don't know if that's how it'll play out in this season, but we'll find out. So, cons from this episode: maggots are gross. Unexpected pregnancy actually turned into a pro. Only because that moment was just like, whoa, what happened? What is that? But then the baby was adorable, and that moment actually turned into a heartwarming moment until Fanny left. Another con, just mention of Bonnet. But the pros were that this episode was a good standalone episode for Jamie and Claire, just to have an adventure, to have a moment to themselves to discuss things, and yeah, I liked seeing them as a team again. Also, I want to say one more thing. The imagery of the birds, that was a lot of birds. After Jamie kills Mr. Beardsley, you hear the gunshot, and all these birds just go flying out of the trees, and it's like, geez, how many birds are in this, like, area? And I kind of thought of an imagery thing here, and it's a metaphor. It could either be those are all of his sins suddenly, like, going away, being freed from the land is clear now. Or it could have been like the wives in a way, because they were buried on the land, the ghosts were haunting Fanny, so maybe it was like their spirits being freed. It could be either or, however you want to look at it, or maybe there's another way to look at it. I am open-minded. Alright guys, let me know what you thought, and I will see you for episode 4, and we will see where this militia is going. Alright guys, have a good day. Bye.